Welcome to this introduction of Unfolding Riane Eisler Initiatives. We want to introduce you here to two initiatives advancing in 2025 with Riane Eisler, her Center for Partnership Systems, and several evolutionary leaders synergy circles and collaboratories. I'm Dr. Kurt Johnson of the Evolutionary Leaders Synergy Circles. One initiative is connecting the dots from family violence to violence in society, which joins a broad-based activism to Riane Eisler's pioneering work in how violence scales in society. So often beginning with the experience of violence in the home instead of peace and partnership in the home. The second is Art for a Partnership Culture, which brings the arts community to the fore in helping us understand partnership consciousness and our urgent need to scale up to becoming a partnership culture. Both initiatives will have short and long-term elements, outreaches, and activities. So we want to grasp this moment to share an initial introduction to these initiatives. Also joined by some special guests, since with events unfolding in the new year, you will likely be hearing more about both connecting the dots and Art for a Partnership Culture very soon. We also want to introduce numerous partners joining us in these initiatives. And you'll find out much more about these at a new website posting soon, RianeEislerConnectingTheDots.com, and also a smaller initial webpage already up, entitled Riane Eisler Initiative at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Thought Leaders Circle, which is at sdgthoughtleaderscircle.org. To summarize briefly, they include, as you just saw in the banners that open this video, the Cornerstones, Media, Founding Mothers, and Unity and Peace circles and collaboratories at the Evolutionary Leaders at evolutionary.net, which is a project of the Source of Synergy Foundation. And especially for the opening season of 2025 events, One World at oneworld.earth, specifically linked to the January Martin Luther King holiday events and their Arts for Partnership Culture activities, which will be hosted there principally by oneworld.earth's co-founder, John Raymer, and his colleagues. Light on Light Publications and Media, where Riane Eisler has also recently co-authored a children's book on these themes, will also be a supportive part. The banners that close out this video will give you all of the relevant links, including the forthcoming website, along with more information about many more partners. So I want to introduce you now to both Riane Eisler and Roger Briggs. Roger, of the Planet Project and author of Emerging World, is part of the Evolutionary Leaders Media Collaboratory at evolutionaryleaders.net, and we'll be discussing all of this with Riane. So let's bridge over to their discussion right now using a colorful banner that shows 6 of Riane Eisler's most well-known books: The Chalice and the Blade, 1987, The Partnership Way, 1990, The Power of Partnership, 2002, The Real Wealth of Nations, 2007, and most recently, in full title, Nurturing Our Humanity, How Domination and Partnership Shape Our Brains, Our Lives, and Our Future, 2019. So let's go over to that discussion right now.
Thank you, Kurt. I'm Roger Briggs, and I'm so honored and excited to be here today with Riane Eisler. She's been a big influence on me, and her work today is all the more important given our situation. And in a short time, we're going to try to cover a lot of what her work is about, and 40 years worth of work. So that's going to be a challenge. But so Riane, so great to be with you.
But it's great to be with you too.
So, your famous book, The Chalice and the Blade, came out in 1987, and if I'm not mistaken, you must have been around 55 years old at that time. So it's so amazing that you've done all this work since that time. And when that book first came out, it created a lot of excitement. And Ashley Montagu, the anthropologist, has famously said it was the most important book since Darwin. But honestly, no one then really understood what was going to unfold and what the situation today is like, and it's really all the more important today, I think. So, but let's start off with you sharing a little bit about your life experiences before that led up to this research that you did that resulted in your work.
Well, as you know, I am very passionate about this work, and that passion is deeply rooted in my own early childhood experiences as a refugee child from the Nazis with my parents, where from one day to the next, from being this cute little kid that people patted on the head, I and my parents, we became hunted with license to kill. And those experiences and growing up in the industrial slums of Havana, and I've written about all of this, especially um, in my latest book, which is Nurturing Our Humanity, which came out with Oxford University Press in 2019 and draws heavily from neuroscience. But really, it led me to questions that years later, obviously, my work set out to answer, which is very simply when we humans have, what I saw all around me, such enormous capacities for caring, for uh, sensitivity, for nonviolence. Why has there been so much violence? So much insensitivity, so much cruelty. Is it inevitable or are there alternatives? And my work shows that, yes, there is an alternative, but we can't see it through the conventional categories that we've inherited from more rigid times that were, from times that were more uh, authoritarian, more violent, more inequitable.
Can you share a little bit about your early research um, and what happened 5,000 years ago, what you discovered? And I gathered at the time it was a bit controversial that there's people that doubted what you were proposing and how you arrived, all this multidisciplinary research you did, how you arrived at this domination partnership continuum.
Well, my life is a lot like the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle coming together. And for some reason, when I went to a school, a bilingual, Spanish and English school in Cuba, there was a teacher who taught about prehistory. And I was fascinated that there even was such a thing. I had never heard of it. Um, and also, I was sent, being Jewish, uh, education was a big thing. And my mother sold all, what jewels she could smuggle out to send me to a very good private school, happened to be a Methodist school. And of the Munoz was the head of the school, Mr. Munoz. And every day we had to go to chapel. And he asked the question, who believes in Jesus Christ? And I got very tired of being the only kid who didn't raise her hand. So I finally did raise my hand. My parents found out about it and hired a rabbi to teach me about Judaism. Well, I was really a very curious child, and I wanted to know, in the Bible it says that henceforth, woman will be, you know, inferior and subordinate to man. And I always wanted to know what was it like before the henceforth. And nobody wanted to talk about that. And I also wanted to know why would Eve ask advice from a snake, from a serpent, because we usually don't do that. Well, in the research, which I then started to do to answer, as I said, the questions of my childhood, I found answers. There was a time when, in terms of the new categories that I introduced, the partnership system and the domination system and the partnership domination social scale, when cultures for thousands of years, really, and you're right, this was at the time, and is still for many people very controversial, but the evidence is very clear. For thousands of years, first in foraging societies, and then in sites like Çatalhöyük in Turkey, in what the archaeologist Maria Gimbutas called Old Europe. There were early farming societies, even both foragers and farmers, and, lived together. And they lived more in partnership rather than in these hierarchies of domination, of man over man, man over woman, race over race, religion over religion, and so forth. And this lasted actually in some places until the high civilization of Minoan Crete, where if we look at the art, and the art is a symbolic language, we see, for example, the so-called dolphin fresco. It could be a modern ecology poster. I mean, it's absolutely amazing art. And there are no scenes of these hallowed rulers or gods sort of reigning over these tiny little creatures at the bottom of the statue. Nothing like that, which tells us of a different culture. And this was a pioneering book. And of course, today, there are lots of books coming out saying, yes, there was a time, but they lack the frame. And this is one of the really, well, aside from being pioneering work, one of the distinguishing aspects of my work is that it offers a new worldview, a partnership and domination systems rather than right, left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, Northern, Southern, capitalist, socialist, and so forth.
Yeah, that's what's so stunning to me about your work is that this domination paradigm really underlies everything for the last 5,000 years. And, historians love to analyze and parse, and there's cycles of history and all these theories of history, but they don't seem to ever drill down to what's been the same the whole time since the first, so-called high civilizations came along, and we still have it today. And we tend to think we've made so much progress, we're so sophisticated, we don't behead people in the town square anymore and all that, but yet we have a Putin, and it still persists. And it's so stunning that it came about, what is this correct, between about 6,000 and 5,000 years ago, there was this emergence of this new social structure of the domination hierarchies.
Well, part of it is that we ignore, we see really history through a very distorted lens. And that's what I discovered in doing my research. I saw right away that, the conventional categories that we have are useless to really cross-culturally and transhistorically understand our past, our present, and the possibilities for a future, because they're all of one piece, okay? And for one thing, all the categories that we've inherited from more authoritarian and violent times, like right, left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, Northern, Southern, capitalist, socialist, they really, every one of them includes societies that have been repressive, aggressive, violent. So none of them tells us what we can build. I mean, the assumption is that that's just human nature, which I really debunk in Nurturing Our Humanity, as I said, which this was my last published book. And I really highly recommend it because it shows that what we've been taught about human nature is just false. Whether it's original sin or selfish genes, it's the same story. We're bad. And actually, this battle between nature and nurture, it's a red herring. It's confusing us because it's not nature or nurture, it's nature and nurture. And nurture is what's really, really important, which takes me to culture, which takes me to the fact that our conventional categories, like, the ones I mentioned, if we really think about it, they marginalize or just ignore nothing less than the majority of humanity, women and children, and hence family. And this is fatal in terms of understanding how domination or partnership systems perpetuate themselves. And I know that you want me to quickly explain the partnership and domination configuration.
Yes, please flesh out for people that aren't familiar with that. What do we mean by domination systems and partnership systems?
First of all, this is not only includes the database that I drew from, includes the whole of humanity, both the male and female forms and everybody in between. It includes the whole of our history, including that very long span that we call prehistory, thousands of years, and the whole of our lives. Family is included, our intimate relations. And what you get is you see these configurations repeating themselves cross-culturally and transhistorically, whether it was Nazi Germany, which, and then Nazi Austria, whether it was Khomeini's Iran, whether it's the Taliban, whether it's the mega movement in the United States, they have a very clear configuration, and it's the domination system. One, they really pay a lot of attention to where we all live in our families, right? So it's not only that there's authoritarianism in the state or the tribe, but in the family. Okay. Secondly is, of course, the degree of violence. Domination systems have built-in violence because how else are you going to maintain these hierarchies of domination? Because you also have hierarchies in partnership systems, but they're hierarchies of actualization, where power is not power over, but power to and power with. But domination systems have child or wife violence against them, sometimes against men, but that's rare. In fact, non-existence really in a pure domination system. And we don't have that anymore. The battle for our future, the struggle for our future is not between right, left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, capitalist, socialist. It's been the partnership between the partnership and the domination configuration. But you have aggressive warfare in all of them, pogroms, lynchings, that's all racism, in-group versus out-group thinking. That's all part of the domination system. And of course, the stories and the language are very different. We need new stories. We need new language. And they're beginning to appear. stories, for example, about trauma, family trauma, but we have to connect the dots. And that's really the most important thing. We have very fragmented consciousness because we're constantly, and now with social media and with AI, and it doesn't have to be this way. You could use social media to bond and to connect. You could use AI, and it depends on how it's programmed. So you're always back to the same thing, culture.
Yeah. So I just have to say this. It seems that the domination hierarchies are perpetuated by males, that the wars and the violence and it's a male thing. And I think you stay away from the word patriarchy, but we have to call it what it is. I mean, am I wrong about that? You don't see that many women dominators from what I can see.
Well, you see women who are dominators, like Maggie Thatcher, for example, who buy into, and a lot of women in the MAGA movement, excuse me, have bought into this, and worldwide, really, like in fundamentalist Iran, they've bought into the domination system. I mean, they'll argue that women are too emotional to be leaders, for example, which is nonsense because men also get emotions, but they don't get the quote soft emotions. Those are quote quoted feminine, like a caring and nonviolence, feelings and sensitivity. But men get contempt and anger. Those are emotions, but they're appropriate for those who are on top. But I do stay away from patriarchy for a number of reasons. First of all, this is not about blaming men. Men in domination systems, well, they have to give nothing less than their lives because some guy on top, like a Putin now, wants more real estate, right? And that's been the case throughout recorded history. Men also have to cripple themselves emotionally and really give up a part of their humanity. This, what we call feminine and masculine. Maybe women have more of a predisposition towards caring because we do give birth and we do lactate and can feed babies, etc. But violence is learned. And so we have to really change our stories, yes, including our media. And there are attempts to do so, but it doesn't mean that we don't show history, the last 5 or so thousand years, recorded history as it was, but that we show that there is an alternative, that there is this partnership alternative. And I can speak personally to how, on a personal level, really, partnership is so much better. My partner, my deceased partner and husband, David Loy, who debunked, by the way, the story that Darwin said that it's all about the survival of the fittest being the meanest, of course. He was a pioneer in debunking that. But we had a partnership. Yes, we fought sometimes. And yes, it wasn't perfect, but my gosh, we were supportive of each other. We loved each other. We were honest with each other. Partnership is so much better, whether it's on the personal level, on the community level, or on the global level.
Let's talk more about partnership and partnership culture and where do we see it? And I think you've said that the Scandinavian countries tend to be more in a partnership
Well,
paradigm.
first of all, we see it, of course, in some of the isolated tribal societies. Not all tribal societies are lean towards partnership. But when Chalice first came out, I got a phone call from an anthropologist at the University of California, Stuart Schlegel, and he said, I did my field work with the Terrorism in the Philippines, and I used to call them radically egalitarian. But after I read your book, I realized they were partnership societies. How the roles and relations of the two forms of humanity are structured is not this peripheral, marginalized, unimportant, right, women's issue. It is a primary social, economic, and family organizing principle, and it's an essential component of either the partnership model or the domination model. And you see it in Nazi Germany, you see it in Stalin's Soviet Union, you see it in Putin's Russia, you see it in the Taliban, you see it in Khomeini's Iran, very different societies, but they all have this configuration in which gender plays a major role. And our language, I mean, like domestic violence, I'm now working on changing it to family violence or violence in the family, because domestic violence immediately gets marginalized. Because we've all been programmed that way. And we have to understand why we've been programmed that way and how to change it. And that's really what I've been focusing on very much now with the four cornerstones of either partnership or domination systems, because we have to address not only through tactics, putting out the fires constantly, the inequities, the violence, the horrors really of domination systems, but deal with foundational causes rather than only symptoms. And those are the four cornerstones that I recommend that we really also focus on. And one of them is, of course, family and childhood, which is vital. We know from neuroscience how vital it is in what we learn to accept as normal or even moral, right? The second is gender, for the reasons that I gave. I mean, think about it. If children grow up in a family that is a dominator family, where the quote male and masculine, quote unquote, is ranked over the female and quote feminine, you learn to equate difference, don't you, with either superiority or inferiority, with dominating or being dominated, with serving, with being served or serving. And this in-group versus out-group attitude translates then to racism, to anti-Semitism, to all the ugly isms that we're trying to leave behind.
So I think you're saying that it really starts in families, and so what does a family in a partnership arrangement look like? It seems to me the couple, the man and the woman, the parents really have to model that.
Well, there are resources on our website that I highly recommend. One is the Caring and Connected Parenting Guide, which it draws on the latest knowledge that we have from neuroscience. Another is an article on the partnership family by the psychologist Julie Azevedo Hanks. And the site is, and I think you'll put it at the bottom of our talk, or I hope it'll be at the bottom of our talk, but it's centerforpartnership.org. But I want to continue, if I may, with the with economics, because yes, family is everything is interconnected. It's always connecting the dots. Economics, we have inherited a hidden system of gendered values, where anything that in domination system is coded masculine rather than quote feminine is rewarded, is valued, is measured. And that has to change. And we can change it. And there are trends in that direction. I mean, starting with the recognition of how GDP leaves out what really counts. The current, whether it's capitalist or socialist, map of economics leaves out the three life-sustaining sectors: the natural economy, the volunteer community economy, and the household economy. Why? Because both, there's nothing in either what Marx or Smith, in these capitalist or socialist writings about caring for nature. In fact, they both just felt it needs to be exploited. It's there to be exploited. But also because we know that we have inherited a way of thinking, which Marx and Smith shared, that the work of caring for people starting at birth was to be done for free by a woman in a male-controlled household. And consider that these theories came out of the 1700s and the 1800s. So in our 21st century, a post-industrial era, they'd be antiquated, but it goes beyond that. They carry the domination system embedded in them. And
So stories is the fourth one, right? That becomes very important.
That's the fourth cornerstone. It's story and language. And of course, what we're trying to do is to change the story, starting with the story about human nature and drawing from the latest knowledge we have from neuroscience, knowing that the Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded to two people who talked about entanglement, about our being enmeshed, interconnected with everything in the universe. I mean, physics is even showing that, but you can't see that in this in-group versus out-group model of the domination system, starting with the in-group of mankind and the female other. But the alternative to patriarchy is not matriarchy. And that's why I avoid it, among other reasons, because, as I said, it's not about blaming men for everything. It's the system that we have to change. But also because what we know is that it is really partnership that is the alternative and was the alternative in our prehistory.
The word partnership everyone's familiar with the word, but we might think of a law firm or some legal agreement or something like that. But it's really a much, much deeper concept. It really is a consciousness of understanding relationship and interrelatedness and shared purpose and working together and,
Yes.
all of these things. And so it really is, as our friend Kurt Johnson says, it's a partnership consciousness. It's a new way of seeing the world, isn't it?
It is a new way of seeing the world. And it's funny that you mentioned legal, because part of my background is as an attorney. I chose that term because in a partnership, legally at least, there's supposed to be mutuality, mutual benefit, mutual respect, mutual transparency, and accountability are two words that have crept into our language as we have been trying to move towards partnership, by the way. Because there are trends in that direction. And our job is really, number one, to show that there is this better alternative. And number two, to build the foundations. And that's the four cornerstones.
Yeah.
To shift them from domination to partnership.
Well, we're almost out of time, but is there anything you'd like to share about your kind of going forward and the things you'd like to see happening? And I know that we've got a team of people working with you to try to bring these things about, but do you want to share some of your ideas of?
Well,
Or-
I think that there are people working on gender. We need to take that very seriously and understand, that it is really, as I said, a primary social, economic, and family organizing principle. There are people working, like the APA, for example, said, that spanking is not only a useless and poor form of discipline, it's ineffective, but that it is harmful. We have to get that information out and change patterns of behavior against children. That's very, very important. But we also have to change our economic system. And I think an entry point for all of us is story and language. And I include under language art. Because one of the projects that I'm interested in is, of course, Art for Partnership, which is part of what we're doing here. But also, we are working on a prize, on a contest for filmmakers and other creatives in this digital age, to come up with stories after they've read all my books. And there are lots of them. A book on economics, The Real Wealth of Nations. The subtitle is Creating a Caring Economics, because caring is not rewarded, is not valued. But it's all interconnected, isn't it? And so I could go on forever, but because it's fascinating. And as you said, Roger, once you have this partnership domination scale, things begin to make sense.
That's what's so powerful about it. We really begin to see history and everything that's going on, what's going on today. Once you start to see it through that lens, it really makes sense. And it's very clear the direction we need to go. And so I'm going to be working on this the rest of my life. And it's so important. But thank you so much for spending time with me, and we'll pass it back to Kurt.
Well, thanks so much, Roger and Riane. So let's go over now to the second part of this program, which is Riane Eisler and John Raymer of One World and the Compassion Games, talking about both the Connecting the Dots and the Arts for a Partnership Culture initiatives. So over now to John and Riane.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful. This is an example of creating art for partnership culture. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Roger. And let's see, Riane, let's bring you here. Oh my gosh. It was so good to be with you there, and it's even better to be with you here. Really, that was very informative. And Riane, I don't know how you do it. I got to ask you. Because the perspective you take, the arc of history, and the scope of change that's needed. How do you stay so hopeful? There are so many times there where you come back and say, but we're changing it. We know we can change. We can do it. And here's signs of it. You are, how do you, come on, tell us. How do you stay so hopeful?
Well, I don't know that I'm really just hopeful. I've been called a realistic visionary. And I think that sums it out. it's an existential commitment, my friend.
Mm.
Because as I wrote a book, as you know, The Power of Partnership, which is a how-to book. In fact, it won the Nautilus Award as the best how-to book of that year. But it uses the partnership nomination scale as a template to examine 7 relationships, how we relate to ourselves, our intimate family and other relations, our work and community relations, but then it goes on to our national relations, our international relations, our relations with our Mother Earth, which is really a matter of life and death, frankly, at this point, as we see even in these horrific fires that we now saw in Los Angeles, and of course, our spiritual relations. It's all of one cloth.
Mm.
And I think that the one thing we need is perseverance, and we need a new worldview. We
Mm.
need a new frame. As Roger said, it changes everything, and it is something that we can work on. But to do so, we have to stop fighting one another and recognize, well, this age-old spiritual principle of our oneness, our interconnection, which is really what partnership is about.
Mm. Well, you've come to the right place, Riane, because I tell you, we are doing this. We genuinely are. And I can't wait for you to see more of it and to do more of it together. So let me tell you what I'm talking about. So specifically here, we're preparing to invite artists to create the kind of art that can illuminate that new worldview that you're talking about. Because I think it's our creative imagination. From there, it's possible that that worldview we can be reminded of. It's awakening and remembering something. And that's part of the blessing of my life is the connection with the indigenous world. And actually, I invited Patricia Ann Davis. I don't know if I was listening to you. I said, oh, Patricia's got to hear this. Because the part about language and the part of story, and that you can remind us that we used to live a different way. Hasn't always been this way. So our goal here is to serve artists, to think about how connecting the dots, and in particular, the 4 foundations that you're speaking to. And as I listened to you, I was saying, artists can't do this by themselves in this game. It's got to be artists partnering with other artists to actually illuminate that worldview is by partnering. And that's part of what we've been learning to do here with Kurt, with Roger, with the evolutionary leaders, developing the practices to actually hear each other and to see how creatively we can weave our strategies together. And this game is a way to invite artists to play with the possibility of bringing that worldview into form.
And I think it starts with changes in consciousness.
Mm.
I said in the video, we have a very fragmented consciousness. And frankly, a lot of denial is in that. I mean, the closer you move to a domination system, like here in the United States, MAGA, for example, the more denial you have. Denial of climate change, which is crazy. Denial of election results, which is, again, you know, part of the pattern of denial. The denial of COVID-19. So much denial. And the ACEs studies show that really childhood, the talk of trauma today, these are all partnership trends, but we need this new frame, this new possibility or we keep fighting right, left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, Northern, Southern, capitalist, socialist. It distracts us, it fragments our consciousness. And frankly, if we keep marginalizing the majority of humanity, women and children, uh, we can't have a systems analysis of culture. And living systems are interconnected, and we can't just talk about linear causes and effects. We have to really recognize, well, what these people who got the Nobel Prize in physics recognize: the entanglement, the enmeshment, the interconnection.
Yes. Our oneness.
Yes. And really, people pushing us back, whether it's fundamentalist Iran, whether it's Putin, whether it's the MAGA movement, whether it's the Taliban. And these are, people, regimes, very different regimes, secular, religious, Eastern, Western, Northern, Southern. Uh, they have a domination worldview. They have the in-group versus out-group thing. It's not coincidental that every one of them focuses so much on subordinating women as the primary out-group, and racism, anti-Semitism, all the ugly isms really are part of that worldview. We too our education is totally fragmenting. That's why this research is so transdisciplinary, because you have to connect the dots.
Right.
It was very simply, if you don't connect the dots, you're stuck in the old fragmented consciousness.
Right. So I want to remind the artists here what those four cornerstones are, right? We're looking for art that will connect family and childhood and gender and economics and story and language. So that's the first part of the challenge, to make art for partnership culture that illuminates this new worldview. Is we want, when people see it or experience it, that says, those things are all connected in deep and profound and meaningful ways. The other thing I want to talk to you about, Riane, this word consciousness. I have a problem with the word. I've never seen it. I don't know what people are talking about. In fact, Patricia says we have a conscience and we could make moral choices. But the reification of the, quote, mind in language, and that so many people talk about we need to change consciousness. What are you talking about?
Well, I'll tell you, I think that again, we're used to separating mind from body, us from the other. It's all part of dominator consciousness. And I will stay with the word, because what we're talking about is really worldview, if you will.
Yes.
And but it's how we fit into that worldview, every last one of us. And by the way, when you were talking about the Four Cornerstones, I wrote an article, because people these days don't read. Well, I really invite you to read some of my books, because people, the way socialism became a global force was that people read Marx, they read Engels, they met to discuss them. They had what we today would call book clubs. But it's very, very important. But this article that I wrote for Compass Magazine is very short. And it really describes the Four Cornerstones, and it shows how all of these different societies focus, the ones that orient towards domination, focus on the Four Cornerstones, if we really think about it. And whereas we are sort of Well, because our education is so fragmented too, and it makes it very difficult to connect the dots. But you can transcend that, obviously, and young people and older people like me are saying, hey, uh, we really have to look at the entire system and leaving out the majority of humanity, women and children and family. I mean, there's a reason for it, obviously, that they emphasize it because we know from neuroscience that what happens in families in our first few years, usually we're in families, before our brains, much less our critical faculties, are formed, that this is a very, very, very formative time. And this is why the campaign to change the just language, is everything is relaxed.
Now we're talking.
To
Yeah.
violence in families, family violence, rather than domestic violence, because why? We're so accustomed to marginalizing domestic violence. Yeah, it's just women and children. Well, we're not going to pay. It's all of these religious leaders keep talking about peace and war and terrorism, but they don't talk about what is it rooted in.
Mm.
And that's where these four cornerstones come in. So I'd really like you to make that article, which I think you have, John,
Yeah.
available. And I also want to say how delighted and excited I am about what you're doing. And
Uh,
this art partnership is just great.
yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. It's a natural evolution in our space together here. And this back to the worldview thing, because what I learned for myself is that in our culture, we are not often reflective. We don't often think about how we're thinking about things. And it's in that space that it's possible. I think Peter Senge said this, is that we don't understand what we see. We see what we understand. And I think that's what you're saying. And if we introduce in a young people, in fact, we started with the Seeds of Compassion, Thrive by Five, a program. And we're born into these narratives, these ways that we've been talking and treating each other for so long that we don't even realize. And that's why the indigenous wisdom has been so profound for me, because in the Diné Bizad, there is no other, for example. There is no way to say, and not you. And yeah, embracing these different worldviews, because to do what you're saying, there's a moment the rug gets pulled out from you. Ontologically,
But I'm glad you bring up the indigenous worldview because I was very happy when a woman who has been studying U.S. indigenous societies, what we call the United States today, um, and what she found when she discovered my book, The Chalice and the Blade, was that they actually, in their configuration, uh, really very much um, what we the whole indigenous worldview, but it's not emphasized. There is gender balance. There is really an understanding of our interconnection with the earth, our Mother Earth, for goodness sakes. We still call our our environment that. And yet our economic systems leave out the natural economy, leave out the household economy, leave out the community volunteer economy when everything rests on those. So we have to change our economic rewards system. And it's human creativity. So we're always bet everything around us, whether it's our material, the desks, the tables, but also our cultures. They're human creations. We can recreate them, but we need the frame. We need this new frame, which isn't so new anymore.
I can't help because I care so much for you that I want you to know the good news. So here's an example and why we're going to New York. Harry Uvegi has a new brand story. Be respectful, accessing nature's diversity. And a way of innovating the economic system to create the flows of resources, common sense, if you will, to underwrite the work needs to happen in bioregions around the world with indigenous leadership and with people in communities going back to the first people. There's so many examples in our community, Riane, where your framework and what you're talking about is being lived into. In fact, the whole compassion games is all about how are we going to inspire others to channel that empathy into actionable service. And part of this is the art that could get made during this time to illuminate that worldview. And I want to show you, and I want to make sure that I'm being supportive to the artists who are here are wondering, okay, how do I participate? So let me show you. I'm going to go on my screen here. And Becky, if you're still here, if Patricia shows up, it was the last minute that I invited her in. Just let me know because I wanted her and Riane. They met recently, but I wanted them to have more of a conversation if possible. All right. So, Riane, I don't know what you know about the compassion games, but there's a lot going on with this right now, especially with the fact that for the last 7 years, AmeriCorps has supported compassion games with the Martin Luther King Day of Service. This is the 30th anniversary of that. The thing that's extraordinary is it's the same day as the inauguration. January 20th is MLK Day. And we're going to be, and Summer and I are going to be in Washington, D.C. on that day, playing a compassion game that we call the Great Togetherness Challenge. Okay. And I'll tell you how I know that. If I go here, I just want to see all the different ways to play. They're here. And there's one in here. Here's the Great Togetherness Challenge. I'm going to show that to you, but we'll come to this one, Called to Create Art for a Partnership Culture. And I'll explain what that means. But first, I want everyone to know about this one, because for me, this is kind of the overarching theme. I think of this, I call it Kairos moment. The challenge here is to unite us, our hearts and our minds, to build a greater America. And believe it or not, Riane, we're going to be there on the inaugural day, asking people a simple question. What can we do together to make America greater than it's ever been? And we have some great champions of compassion supporting us. Not only Martin Luther King, but Muhammad Ali will have just launched this Compassion Index for America. So we're encouraging people anywhere you are to step up and tell us your ideas about how we together in partnership, in a partnership culture, can make America greater than it's ever been. And whatever your answer is, okay, well, how can we do that? And it's going to be fun. It's going to be creative. It's another expression of this kind of unifying, coming together to take on these challenges. Because we've reached the point where no one of us can do it. We know that. And yet we're really still very much beginners at weaving strategies together and thinking creatively. So the way this game is working is we're inviting people to come and submit a proposal. Tell us what the art is you want to make. And I could see now, as a result of this conversation, the art's got to connect the dots. And I don't want any artists doing it by themselves. I want the art to be an expression of partnership amongst artists who are coming together. I think that makes the most sense given what we're saying, that art promotes partnership and understanding. And that creating of impactful art, we're asking you to share your creativity. By coming up here in this way to play, there's a link to a grant application. So we're raising funds to be able to underwrite artists who will make their art over a period of time. And let me show you, we've put these slides together to kind of help make this a little easier for folks to understand. So let's go back to the very beginning, just so you hear. Are you ready to use your creative voice to challenge the status quo? All right, hold on. This is a call to create art for partnership culture. And We're looking for art that offers an alternative to the dominant culture of power over and control and competition, that imagines a partnership culture where cooperation, respect, and care for each other and the earth are at the center. This art should spark dialogue, inspire hearts, and lights a path towards a more compassionate and regenerative world. Any medium, painting, poetry, sculpture, digital art, performance, they're all acceptable. Your art has the potential to offer new perspectives, challenge entrenched narratives, and invite people into a shared vision of a better world. So, this is like a timeline. So that the idea is that between now and it's the MLK Ali 40 days of peace. So, Riane, I'm hoping that on March 1st, which is a Saturday, and March 2nd, that weekend, we have what we call the Beloved Community Convergence. So we're hoping during this 40-day period that we get a bunch of applications and that we can then review them together and fund a number of them, give them the time to work on what they're doing, and then honor next January is the 40th anniversary of Chalice and the Blade. And we were talking about using that because we do this every year. It is MLK again next year. So let me see if there's anything here else I should show. Just to be clear, let me open this up. It's not as big as I'd like it to be, so hold on. And that last slide, that's a little bit, this one here, I just want to make it clear. This is the timeline. So 12/21 to March 2nd, we'll award then some number of those grants, create and work on the art and deliver it by the end of the year. And then next year on in the MLK Day or some of the right time around that, we're going to announce the winning. And we want it to be open, so there'll be a juried response. But I want you, Riane, and others that we choose to be, looking at the art and saying, "Oh my God, this is the art that has inspired us all to shift, and the world is better after that. Everything is taken care of. Come next January, don't worry, we will have fixed all the problems. Everyone will be partnering everywhere with each other and with all life on Earth."
I hope, and pray in my way that we can work together because changing the culture is really our great calling. And art has, as you say, John, such a role in this. And I really think that it covers the whole spectrum, doesn't it? Of our activities. So, oh, and by the way, I see that Kurt, and bless you, Kurt, for doing that. He put in the chat the links to the compass paper that I mentioned, and also to an interview that I did for the Scientific American, which really it talks about how the roots of authoritarianism start in families, actually. And it's very, very relevant, especially in our time of regression to the domination side, that we have to, and we've had, Nazis were a period of regression, and we overcame that. I mean, we have to understand the whole arc of our history, including our prehistory.
Right.
We have to have this different frame.
Well, that frame for me, Riane, I'd love your feedback on this. This was something, because I was blessed to have a great teacher of the philosophy of language and studied this. And the foundation that he talked about is, yes, we're biological beings, but we're social and cultural beings. And we're also linguistic beings.
Absolutely.
We invent our future. Because this is the thing he said to me. He asked me a question that changed my life. And I would love to share this with you. He asked me, why are dogs never late? And that answer led to a shift of my worldview. And I hope it does that for everyone here. They don't make promises. That is unique to who we are, and that's the possibility for us to commit to a new way of living. The fact that we can do that, and the power of language is not representational, it was constitutive. All of a sudden, I realized that language has the potential for us to actually realize the dream that you're speaking about by changing the conversations that we're in.
Absolutely. And we can each use our circle of influence, our friends, our colleagues. We all have the possibility of making change happen.
Yes. This goes back to my problem with consciousness as a word, because awareness is not enough. Awareness plus commitment that we followed through on. That's this next evolving potential here. Having the awareness, necessary but not sufficient. It's then committing and then acting on following through on those commitments that I've seen is what really makes real change happen for human beings. And I'm promising you that we're going to use this art for a partnership culture to bring us much closer. Like, so let's surprise ourselves because we're at an age of tremendous change. AI is unbelievable, Riane. The potential, the pain of social media, the impact on our kids, the pandemic, the Trump, all this stuff. It's such a huge change we're going through. We are generation transition.
Well, I think that you're right, that it's commitment, but consciousness leads to action. And you're absolutely right that consciousness alone is just the beginning. It's a virtuous cycle
Yes.
talking about here. That consciousness leads to action, and action leads to change, which in turn leads to further change in consciousness, which in turn leads to more action, etc. And that circle is what we really have to cultivate.
I want that art to show that. I got that circle right there. Riane, that is so healing for me to hear you say that and for us to affirm that and for us as a community to know that. That moves us a huge step closer to where we need to get to right now.
Well, thank you so much, Roger Briggs and John Raymer, for joining Riane Eisler in this initial presentation of two of her initiatives, Connecting the Dots from Family Violence to Violence Society and Arts for a Partnership Culture. And welcome also to browsing the website Riane Eisler ConnectingTheDots.com. You can find all of the additional relevant information on activities and partners at the websites listed on the banners, which follow hereafter as we close the program. Thanks so much, and thanks for your partnership in these initiatives, which are so important to the health and future of our world.